Imagine America in the year 1900. There are exactly 5,000 millionaires in the entire country.
Right, which isn't a lot.
No, not at all. But then you fast forward to today, and that number has just exploded to over 8.2 million.
That is a massive, massive jump.
It really is. And the wild part is most of those people are entirely self-made. Like
Yeah.
they started with absolutely nothing. No generational wealth, no trust funds, just nothing.
Right.
So how does that happen? Well, the sources we're unpacking for this deep dive argue that the secret to all that staggering wealth is actually driven by the exact same biological and spiritual mechanism that lowers your risk of a heart attack.
Yeah, it's this phenomenal collision of disciplines. I mean, we're looking at ancient Buddhist philosophy sitting right alongside a 2005 bioethics study on cardiovascular health.
Which is just wild.
It is. And then all of that is mapped directly onto a hard numbers analysis of self-made multi-billionaires. So
Yeah.
the underlying premise tying all this together for you today is the law of cause and effect.
Right, the law that basically says nothing just happens on its own.
Exactly. Whether it's framed as karma in Eastern philosophy or, the iron law of the universe in economics, the core mechanism is identical. There are no causeless effects. Every single thought, action, or even a deliberate lack of action sets a tangible wave of energy into motion.
Which, I mean, that sounds beautiful in a philosophical sense, right?
Sure.
But to really buy into this, I feel like we have to look at the physical evidence first. The concept of karma is widely understood as this universal law of action. But our sources actually bring in Stephen G. Post's 2005 research.
Yeah, the study from the International Journal of Behavioral Medicine.
Right. Post is a bioethics PhD, and he specifically measured altruism and its effect on physical health. So he's basically pulling karma out of the spiritual realm and putting it right under a microscope.
He really is. Post's research is the bridge between the abstract and the empirical. He wanted to see if the cause of altruism, like performing acts of generosity or kindness, actually produced a measurable physiological effect in the human body.
And what did he find? Because it's easy to say, just be nice and good things happen.
Well, the data showed a very distinct biological chain reaction. When a person engages in an altruistic act, the brain immediately releases this surge of neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
We're talking dopamine and oxytocin.
Oh, wow. So the feel-good chemicals.
Exactly. And this creates a profound psychological sense of contentment and happiness.
I look at that almost like, well, like a compounding interest account, but within your own nervous system.
That's a great way to put it.
Because we always hear that cliche, right? Be nice and good things happen, which implies some invisible external force is keeping score and rewarding you.
Right, like the universe is handing out gold stars.
Exactly. But the mechanism here is entirely internal. It's like every act of altruism deposits a microdose of those positive neurotransmitters, and over time, that compounding interest pays real physical dividends.
And those dividends are highly specific. That state of psychological contentment actively suppresses the release of stress hormones, particularly cortisol.
Which is the one you really don't want flooding your system.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Cortisol is corrosive when it's constantly in the bloodstream. It causes systemic inflammation, it stiffens arterial walls, and it basically forces your heart to work so much harder.
Jeez.
Yeah, so by initiating the cause of a kind act, you suppress that cortisol production. Your blood vessels remain elastic, your blood pressure stabilizes, and over the course of decades, your statistical risk of a cardiovascular event just plummets.
So you are literally extending your own lifespan through the chemistry of compassion. That is amazing.
It really is. And Dr. Wayne Dyer actually touches on this mechanism in the source material.
Sure.
He emphasizes that the energy you put out returns to you basically as a survival strategy.
Right, and it brings a deeply practical edge to the teachings of the Dalai Lama, who is also cited in our sources here.
Oh, absolutely.
The Dalai Lama notes that our actions shape not just our present circumstances, but our future realities. He urges people to live honorably so that when they're older, they can look back and enjoy it a second time.
I love that quote. The psychology behind that is fascinating because the Dalai Lama is basically advocating for the deliberate construction of an internal environment, an environment that won't turn toxic as you age.
Yeah.
He says how people treat you is their karma, right? That's their cause. But how you react, the internal chemical and emotional environment you choose to foster, that is yours.
Right. So if this law functions so reliably on a microscopic biological level inside our own blood vessels, we kind of need to look at how it behaves when it crosses over into the external world.
Yeah, when it scales up.
Exactly. And our sources highlight the story of Dick and Rick Hoyt as just a prime example of this scaling up. Now, for those who don't know, Rick was born with severe cerebral palsy,
Yeah, and the medical prognosis was absolute. I mean, doctors stated he would be in a vegetative state and would basically never participate in society.
which is just such a heavy, grim baseline reality to be handed.
It's devastating. But the father, Dick Hoyt, chose to introduce a radical new cause into that equation. He began pushing Rick in a specialized wheelchair.
Just for local runs at first.
Were just local 5Ks. But eventually they were doing full marathons and even Ironman triathlons. And the initial cause was highly localized. It was just a father wanting his son to feel the wind in his face, to participate in an athletic event.
But the effect of that highly localized cause completely escaped its original boundaries. I
Yeah.
mean, by simply competing, they shattered global systemic assumptions about the limits of severe disabilities.
They absolutely did.
They changed how millions of people, and even medical professionals, viewed cerebral palsy.
Yeah, and we see that same kind of exponential scaling in the economic sphere, too, with Muhammad Yunus.
Oh, right, the economist in Bangladesh.
Exactly. So in the 1970s and 80s, he observed this crippling cycle of poverty. Local villagers were being forced to borrow money from loan sharks at these exorbitant interest rates just to buy raw materials.
So they were kept in perpetual, inescapable debt.
Right. But then in 1983, Yunus initiated a totally counterintuitive cause. He founded the Grameen Bank. And the whole idea was offering microloans to the poorest citizens without requiring any collateral whatsoever.
Which, I mean, on paper, handing out unsecured loans to people living in extreme poverty seems like a recipe for immediate institutional bankruptcy.
Yeah, most banks would laugh you out of the room.
Right, so how did this actually function as a viable cause?
Well, the mechanism was rooted in social architecture rather than financial collateral. Yunus structured the loans around small solidarity groups, usually like 5 individuals.
Okay.
So while the loans were given to individuals, the group as a whole was responsible for the repayment discipline. If one person defaulted, the others in the group would be restricted from future borrowing.
Oh, wow. So he replaced physical collateral with social collateral.
Exactly. Trust, community support, pure accountability.
So the cause wasn't just giving away money. The cause was engineering a system of trust and accountability. And the effect was that millions of people, overwhelmingly women, actually used those small loans to buy a sewing machine or livestock, and they started their own businesses and broke the cycle of poverty.
And the repayment rate for Grameen Bank hovered around 98%,
That is just incredible.
far outperforming traditional banks. And that specific, meticulously designed cause scaled so dramatically that it eventually earned Yunus the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize.
Which really proves that the magnitude of an effect will often outpace the initial cause, as long as the mechanism is sound and sustained.
Yes, perfectly said.
Which kind of brings us to the human brain's desperate need for these exact kinds of mechanisms. We just crave predictability.
We really do.
Whether we're trying to predict our cardiovascular health or figure out how to lift a community out of poverty, we want a reliable recipe.
Yeah.
And our sources argue that this exact same need for a reliable recipe is the driving force behind modern financial success.
And the data on wealth generation in the United States really underscores this perfectly. I mean, we are looking at a $12 trillion economy that expands by $500 to $600 billion annually.
The sheer volume of capital moving through the system is just unprecedented.
It's massive.
And the trajectory is wild. From those 5,000 millionaires in 1900, we hit 5 million by the year 2000. And then, after a brief plateau, the number surged another 33% to over 8.2 million.
And again, the defining characteristic of this group, according to the sources, is that virtually all of them started with nothing. No inheritance, no elite connections.
Right.
When you have millions of independent actors starting from zero and arriving at the exact same statistical destination, it ceases to be an anomaly. It basically demonstrates a replicable cause.
Like, if 8.2 million people bake a cake, there has to be a recipe.
Exactly.
But I hear these statistics, and realistically, when we look at the specific multi-billionaires listed in our sources, people like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Michael Dell, Paul Allen, the Walton family, are we really supposed to believe they're just applying a universal law?
I know, it sounds a bit...
I mean, isn't there a massive element of survivorship bias here?
Yes.
Weren't they just born in the right zip code at the exact right moment in the technological revolution with access to resources most people just don't have?
Oh, for sure. It is the most common and frankly the most valid critique of wealth statistics.
Right.
But to understand why it's not just the luck of the draw, The sources pivot away from the billionaires for a minute, and they focus on the author of this specific financial analysis.
Okay.
He was the absolute antithesis of privilege, a high school dropout who worked manual labor. We're talking farms, construction sites, factory lines, twisting nuts onto bolts.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was explicitly told that his lack of education permanently capped his earning potential.
So he was staring at the absolute bottom of the economic ladder. And anyone listening to this who has ever felt stuck in a dead-end job or felt like the system was rigged against them knows that exact state of frustration.
Totally. And that frustration led him into sales, where he encountered a pure, unfiltered example of the law of cause and effect. He noticed a colleague in his office who was making 10 times more money than anyone else.
10 times.
10 times. And they were selling the exact same product at the identical price point to the same demographic out of the very same office.
Yeah, which completely eliminates the variables of zip code or timing or access to special resources. I mean, the environment was identical.
Yep, the only variable left was the behavior of the individual. So he approached the top earner and just simply asked what he was doing differently. And he discovered that success leaves tracks.
Success leaves tracks. I like that.
Yeah, the top earner wasn't just working more hours, he was utilizing a completely different set of mechanical causes.
What were the actual tracks he was laying down, though? Because it's rarely just, working harder.
Right, the tracks were highly specific methodologies. The top earner had a different method for qualifying leads, so he wasn't wasting time on unviable prospects.
That makes sense.
He used specific, open-ended phrasing during his pitches to uncover the client's actual needs rather than just blindly pushing a product. He structured his daily routine to do administrative work during off hours.
So he could spend his peak hours exclusively talking to clients.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, he didn't treat rejection as a personal failure. He treated it as data to refine his next pitch.
So he literally treated it like a recipe.
He did. And when the high school dropout copied those exact methods, when he initiated the same causes, his results immediately skyrocketed. He replicated the effect.
Which is honestly a profound psychological relief, realizing that success and failure are not purely accidental.
Because the human mind requires coherence. When we believe the world is random, that wealth or health is just a lottery, we experience chronic anxiety and helplessness.
Oh, absolutely.
But when we recognize that a reliable framework exists, it satisfies that deep psychological need for control.
But see, this introduces a massive cognitive dissonance for me.
Yeah.
If the blueprint is genuinely just lying there, if the tracks are clearly visible and proven to work, why do the sources state that the vast majority of people are broke well into their 40s and 50s?
That's the big question.
Right. Like if it's just a recipe, what is stopping everyone from baking the cake?
The answer lies in a concept from the sources that is, frankly, quite ruthless, and that is nature is neutral.
Nature is neutral. That is probably the most striking philosophical point in this entire deep dive.
It really changes how you look at things.
It does. Going back to the baking analogy, the oven is entirely indifferent to the moral character of the baker. It does not care if you're deeply compassionate or incredibly selfish.
Right.
Doesn't care if you have a PhD or if you dropped out of high school. It operates with the blind impartiality of physics. If you mix the right ingredients and set the right temperature, the oven produces the cake.
Which is precisely why we experience so much frustration in the workplace, or really just in life. You might watch someone who is entirely unlikable or who seems less intelligent than you achieve massive financial or professional success.
And your first instinct is to say the system is broken.
Always.
Yeah.
But nature's neutrality dictates that they aren't succeeding because they are inherently better people. They are succeeding because, despite their flaws, they are executing the proven causes.
Wow. And conversely, you can be the most altruistic, kind-hearted person on Earth, generating all that physiological health we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the dopamine and oxytocin.
Right. But if you do not initiate the specific causes required for financial independence like saving, investing, acquiring high-value skills, the oven is not going to bake you $1 million.
It won't. Nature's neutrality refuses to cross-pollinate the recipes.
That neutrality forces a very uncomfortable self-reflection, doesn't it? If the universe isn't holding you back, what is?
Well, the barrier is purely human persistence, or rather, the lack of it. The sources highlight a statistic that perfectly illustrates why the wealth gap exists.
Okay, what is it?
When faced with a new goal, starting a business, changing careers, implementing a budget, the average number of times a person attempts it before giving up is less than 1.
Wait, less than 1.
Less than one.
That means the mathematical average of human persistence involves quitting before the very first physical action is even taken.
Right. The internal monologue defeats them before they even step up to the oven. People talk themselves out of the effort by citing external variables.
Oh, sure. They blame the state of the economy or their upbringing or their current boss.
Exactly. And by convincing themselves that the oven is rigged, they retreat to a psychological safe haven that the sources call someday I'll.
Someday I'll. Someday I'll start investing. Someday I'll write that book. Someday I'll ask for the promotion.
We all know it.
Is a brilliant metaphor because it's a destination populated entirely by good intentions that never actually translate into kinetic energy.
And living on someday I'll is the ultimate defiance of the law of cause and effect. You are sitting there demanding that the universe provide you with a highly specific event while actively refusing to initiate the necessary cause,
You're basically asking nature to violate its own neutrality just for you.
which it will never do.
Never. Which brings us directly to you, the person listening to this right now. The overarching mission of synthesizing these diverse sources is to provide you with the framework to vote yourself off someday I'll.
That's the goal.
So how do we actually merge the biological compounding interest of karma with the cold mechanical recipe of the iron law of success?
Well, the sources outline a 4-step synthesis to manually operate this law in your daily life.
Okay, lay them on me.
The first step is adopting mindful decision-making. You must transition from being a passive observer of your life to becoming an active architect.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning recognizing that there are no neutral actions. Every time you choose to doom scroll instead of reading or spend instead of save, you are actively laying a track. You are building tomorrow's reality with today's micro decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. And step 2 builds right on top of that. Absolute accountability.
Yes.
You have to entirely abandon the mechanism of blame. Because when we look at the physics of blame, it's just a dead end. Pointing out that the economy is bad or your industry is unfair is a static cause.
It produces a static effect.
Exactly. It changes nothing about your material condition. Embracing responsibility means recognizing that even if a situation isn't your fault, your reaction to it is your only available cause.
Spot on. And step 3 requires harnessing your internal narrative. We talked about how the average person quits before trying even once.
Right, the less than 1 statistic.
Yeah. That happens because limiting beliefs set undesired events into motion. If you enter a negotiation believing you have no leverage, your body language, your phrasing, and your persistence will all reflect that lack of belief.
You will unconsciously generate the exact failure you feared.
Precisely. You have to actively override those default scripts and focus intensely on growth and execution.
And finally, the 4th step is maintaining karmic awareness, which really brings us full circle back to Stephen G. Post and the Dalai Lama.
It does.
It means treating karma not as some mystical ledger kept by the universe, but as a series of deliberate physiological and social choices.
Yes. You choose to act with integrity, empathy, and altruism, not just because it's polite, but because it builds the internal cardiovascular resilience and the external social trust that you need to sustain long-term success.
You are engineering a network of goodwill.
Right. And by executing those 4 steps, you align yourself with the underlying mechanics of the universe. You stop hoping for a lucky break and you start methodically walking down the tracks left by those who have already reached the destination.
It really is a profound shift in perspective. I mean, from the stress hormones in your bloodstream, to the social collateral of a village in Bangladesh, to the daily habits of a self-made millionaire, it is all governed by the exact same principle.
It's universal.
The universe operates as a strict, impartial machine. The oven does not judge you, it simply waits for the batter. You, and you alone, are the initiator of the chain.
Which leaves you with a critical and perhaps slightly uncomfortable question to examine after this deep dive.
What's that?
If nature is truly neutral and it is simply sitting there waiting for your specific cause to produce an effect, what is the invisible cause you are unconsciously setting into motion right now that is creating the very effect you are complaining about today?
Oof. That is the cognitive dissonance we all have to face. It's time to audit your tracks, check the recipe you're using, and take control of the outcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Now get out there, get off someday I'll, and start putting the right causes into motion.